That's right, Jim, but this does come from the Ukrainian government. They confirm that 2 of their fighter jets have been shot down here in eastern Ukraine. Now, there's a lot of crucial details that we don't know, which will put this story and these events into significant context. We don't know what the aircraft were, and in particular, we don't know what sort of weapon was used to shoot them down. Now, of course, all of this comes just 6 days after the downing of Malaysia Airlines flight MH17. The theory of much of the international community is that a very sophisticated Russian weapon known as a Buk missile system was used to shoot down that passenger aircraft. There is a question mark now over just whether that same weapon or some other weapon, because we know the pro-Russian rebels do have a number of surface-to-air missiles at their disposal and surface-to-air missile systems, anti-aircraft systems and so forth. We're waiting to see precisely, or to try and learn, what weapon was used there. And I think it also shows something about the ongoing nature of the conflict here, despite the fact that there has been this truly horrible civilian disaster over this conflict zone that would seem to have been caused, according to the international community, or much of it, by a weapon fired possibly by pro-Russian forces. That has not in any way slowed the pro-Russian forces and their willingness to still maintain a very much I guess an aggressive nature or an aggressive approach towards Ukrainian air power. They've shot down 2 more aircraft just 6 days after the Malaysia Airlines aircraft was downed over these same skies. It is significant, but what it shows is this is still an ongoing conflict zone. We've known that because we've been hearing the heavy weapons used across this region as we've been reporting on the Malaysia Airlines story. We know that in the week leading up to the Malaysia Airlines story, 2 other Ukrainian military aircraft were shot down, another fighter jet and a transport plane. So in this active conflict zone, the effort to take out Ukrainian air power continues by pro-Russian forces, despite the loss of 298 people aboard Malaysia Airlines MH17. Jim.
Yeah, it also signals, of course, that Russia is continuing to give the green light for the use of this weaponry there in eastern Ukraine. I'm wondering how extensive is the use of military aircraft in the conflict itself by the Ukrainian government of Kiev?
Well, the Ukrainian government air power is the one key advantage that it has over the pro-Russian forces. It has been used to considerable effect, particularly in the weeks leading up to the downing of MH17, when the momentum of this conflict has really swung towards Ukrainian government forces. They've been very effective at driving the pro-Russians from a number of their strongholds to the point where they've now fallen back here to the Donetsk city and the region east of here, and also to the area around Luhansk. They've lost a lot of territory, really. Ukrainian government air power is said to have played a very big role in that. And so that is why the pro-Russian militants initially have tried to even the playing field a little, and that's why the Ukrainian government aircraft have become regularly targeted, particularly in recent weeks. Whether or not the downing of MH17 should play any role in the Russian rebels' attitude towards taking on Ukrainian air power, I guess that is a matter for discussion. But clearly, from the point of view of the pro-Russians, they believe that Ukrainian aircraft are still very much viable, fair targets. And we're seeing another example of that, the Ukrainian military losing 2 more fighter jets today, Jim.
Of course, civilian aircraft now are on notice. They have been duly warned of the potential consequences of using that airspace. What is the situation on that front?
Well, that's right. So we understand that some civilian aircraft are obviously avoiding this airspace now, but even when they were using it at considerable altitude, generally an altitude much higher than the ground attack fighter jets that were being used to attack the pro-Russian forces, higher also most of the time than the transport aircraft that were moving things logistically around for Ukrainian government forces as well. But the Ukrainian air power was one theory, and it is a theory that has been put forward by analysts, is that Ukrainian air power was making such a difference to this battle that is what resulted in that Buk missile system being introduced to this conflict zone to try and level the playing field, if you like. It is just a theory, as I say. It was being used to some effect, and we saw a Ukrainian government aircraft being down before the crash of MH17, and now 6 days later we are seeing it again. But I guess it is the point to remember that this is still very much an active conflict zone. There is no ceasefire officially that has been negotiated, although the Ukrainian government says it has declared one unilaterally in an area surrounding MH17's wreckage. Across this region, fighting continues. Certainly on the ground, we hear shelling and heavy weapon use multiple times on a daily basis in the near distance on the outskirts of Donetsk city here, and also pretty close to the wreckage site as well when we're out there also. So what this shows is that yes, it continues on the ground and it continues in the air as well, Jim.
All right, and as we look across this, we were put up a map there just a moment ago showing the location, the crash site of MH17. We do not yet have an exact location for where these two fighter jets were shot down. This is an indication that this very advanced weaponry has been moving into eastern Ukraine in support of the pro-Russian fighters there. It would seem to be fairly damning evidence that Moscow is more involved here than they have admitted.
Well, that is very much the argument that the West has been making for some time, even before the downing of MH17 and the very strong suspicion the pro-Russian forces were responsible for that. These pro-Russian forces on the ground have been using fairly sophisticated weaponry, armoured vehicles, anti-aircraft missiles and fire and so forth. These are weapons, the West argues, that cannot simply be in the possession of protesters or locals who've taken up arms against the Ukrainian government, which is very much the scenario that Russia and Moscow has painted throughout this conflict, often referring to these people as local protesters, people who the Ukrainian government should not be using military force upon. But increasingly, they have become better armed. It is thought that some of these arms have been taken from the Ukrainian military, seized during skirmishes and so forth. But the very strong suspicion of the international community, particularly, as I say, the West, the United States and Europe, is that Russia is the one that has been providing the pro-Russian rebels with the weapons capable of this sort of activity, Jim.
All right.